And we're now recording. Great. Okay.
Ready?
All right. I'm very pleased to introduce distinguished Professor Dietmar Hutmacher. I know Dietmar through his involvement in the Centre for Behavioural Economics, Society and Technology. Dietmar is one of our program leads in the biomedical area. But Dietmar is also an amazing academic who has a huge impact in practice. Dietmar, as you can see on, as you saw on the slide, is a professor and chair in regenerative medicine. He's the director of the ARC Centre in Additive Biomanufacturing. I see Dietmar constantly in the media with headlines such as "Another World First" or "QUT scientist to battle breast cancer with 3D printing." I find what Dietmar does absolutely amazing, and it's a really interesting combination of mechanical engineering and the biomedical area. So Dietmar is going to come and give us a bit of the backstory around how he's developed some of these amazing 3D printed body parts. And it's certainly something that is revolutionizing the area of medicine. So without further ado, handing over to you, Dietmar.
Thank you, Rebecca. And thanks for having me. Yeah, as Rebecca mentioned, I'm the director of the Australian Research Training Center in Additive Biomanufacturing, and this is here our webpage. And when we started almost 5 years ago, when I put this all together, it is very important, I think, you know, you see the wording up here: we discover, we innovate, and we translate. And there's a big difference between discovery, the innovation, and the translation. And often what is forgotten in the academic world is this translation into, as you would say at QUT, real world applications, right? So the discovery is really the fundamental research. Then the innovation, you can also have innovation in fundamental research, but often it's something in between fundamental and applied research. But then the key is, can you really translate this? So for us in the training center, again, this is very important. And again, it's around this research field where we develop technology, we develop new materials, but then the clinical translation is also very important to us. And that's something I have been doing since the start of my academic career, because before I started my academic career, I spent 10 years in industry. So I always wanted to do fundamental research, but also by heart, I always wanted to translate the excitements from the fundamental research into real world applications. So that's what we do. And importantly, we do this with different universities and different partners also from the industry. So maybe I like to play you this video first, which explains a lot of one of the technologies which we have translated into the clinic.
Meet 27-year-old Ruben Lichter, who's making medical history.
An infection had eaten out basically my entire tibia bone. So it was either amputation above the knee, or I could try this experimental procedure.
It was something that had never been done before, and Ruben came along as an ideal candidate to embark on what is world first surgery.
Last month, Ruben had a 3D printed bone scaffold implanted into his leg at Brisbane's Princess Alexandra Hospital, and the 14-hour surgery was nothing short of miraculous.
This is an exact model of Ruben's leg before the operation. So there's quite a lot of bone missing there, 36 centimetres in fact. And then to bridge that gap, we've used these 3D printed models which slot into the bony defect. And then to create living bone, what we've had to do is line the inside of the 3D scaffold with biological tissue. And that tissue has come from the adjacent fibular bone with its blood supply intact, and then a transplant from the knee of the opposite side. Then the roof of the scaffold is put on top, and then we wait for the bone to form.
The scaffold was designed here at the University of Technology, Queensland, by Professor Dietmar Hutmacher.
So it took us to be used on humans a development time, a total of 10 years. So we did a number of preclinical studies where we proved the concept that this patient-specific scaffolds would really regenerate large bone defects.
And he has high hopes for what his designs will do for medicine in the future.
Bone tissue engineering is one program we work on, but another big program where we actually also have a lot of preclinical data is in the area of breast tissue engineering. And what we can foresee, if everything works well, we will start a clinical trial by the end of next year for 3D printed breast scaffolds, which are for patients which undergo mastectomies.
As for Ruben, he's looking forward to keeping up with his 9-month-old son, William.
So my plans for the future, once everything sort of heals and once I get my leg back, I really want to do a lot of activities with William. I want to be able to teach him how to ride a bike and do all sporty things, run around with him, and just get my old life back, be active and healthy.
So this case is now more than 2.5 years ago. So when this video was taken, this is 2.5 years. So the patient went back to work after 1 year. He started walking after 6 months. So this is very rewarding when you work in this area. But as I said in this video, this has a very long development time. And actually this work started already, about 14, 15 years ago, back in Singapore when I was an academic at the National University of Singapore. So there we actually developed the technology and we did spun off a company called Osteopore. And why do we need these implants, right? So again, one of the main things for Ruben was that the normal medical procedure would have been that he would have lost his leg. But to salvage his leg, we had to have the development of what we call biodegradable implants. So the scaffold you have seen actually degrades over a period of 3 to 4 years. And then only Ruben's own bone is left behind. So there's obviously a big need for that because the permanent implants have a lot of problems. But again, what is quite important in this development stage is, again, you have this research initiation, which was in 1996, right? So then in Singapore, 6 years later, we did a first in human. This was just one patient, right? Then we funded the company. And I think also interesting for you with a business background is, you know, even so I was coming out of industry, what happened to this company was we were 6 founders, 3 engineers and material scientists and 3 surgeons, you know, and I also did an MBA. So I did write the business plan, but I didn't want to run the company. So this was a big problem for us. We got some initial funding, but then the company actually developed very slowly. As you can see here, very importantly, you need to get approval in the medical field from agencies like the FDA, or in Australia, this is TGA, and this has nothing to do with innovation anymore. This is really that you have to do your homework and that you have to comply to certain rules to develop the innovative product in the lab into a product which is approved by an agency. So for example, again, in the video, the models you have seen, they have been all printed in my lab. And we also did design and print prototypes. But of course, the final implant cannot be printed in my QUT research lab because I'm not complying to the agency's rules and so on. And I will never do, because my job is to do research and innovation, right? But again, the company can do this. And therefore, our design file was sent to Osteopore and they did manufacture the final implant. So here again, then next to that, you need to get approval from the agencies. You also need to get certification. Like in today's world, it's all about ISO norms, where you, again, in your manufacturing, need to comply to a very stringent rule. So one product looks like the other. Then there was CE approval, which is the European approval for the products. Another, and you go country by country, right? So in each country has a little bit of a different process. which you need to comply to and where you need to apply to if you want to market your products in this country. So this is Korea. Again, this is ISO. And then, of course, you are inspected all the time by these agencies, right? So this was a very long time development in where innovation was not so much about new products, but all about the manufacturing and getting the approvals. But luckily, even it took such a long time, you know, osteopore was ASX listed last year, which was really great to see. But again, this just shows you that there is a very long way for this product development in the medical field. So you also heard me then saying in the video that we are working on breast tissue engineering. And again, this was 2.5 years ago, where I said that we wanted to start clinical trials this year. So again, based on the experiences I had with osteopore, we developed again very innovative products for breast tissue engineering. And I would like to show you another clip here, where again, also more than 2.5 years ago, this story came out.
Australian First Research is using 3D printing to offer fresh hope to breast cancer sufferers who've undergone invasive surgery. The Queensland team believes it can help women feel whole again. Lachlan Kennedy has this exclusive report.
Engineering meets biomedicine in a breakthrough for breast cancer patients.
That we use 3D printing to design and manufacture patient-specific implants.
For the past 4 years, Queensland researchers have been designing biodegradable scaffolds to be inserted when cancer-affected breasts are removed. Printed from personalised scans, they would be filled with the patient's own fat.
That allows then the tissue not only to grow into the scaffold, but to mature.
Early animal studies appear promising.
These white patches here are the scaffold, and all around here is the surrounding tissue which is grown in. So this suggests that there was very good integration of the tissue with the host.
It's a procedure that would have saved Tammy Lai James significant trauma. 3 years after a mastectomy, she underwent what's called tran-flap surgery.
So they cut you from hip bone to hip bone, and then they take out so much of your stomach, and then they actually make it fit and fashion it to fit on your breast tissue.
A painful and invasive operation, the mother of two believes this new technique will change lives.
I just think it's the biggest breakthrough that can come through for breast cancer patients.
It's progress funded by the community through Project Pink from the PA Research Foundation. The research team is hoping to move to clinical trials next year, but it's already looking to the future, in particular, the possibility of combining these with chemotherapy drugs.
The treatment would be at a much, much lower doses and would be localized and would not go via the entire body.
To actually have that all done at once, it lessens the burden on everybody.
Lachlan Kennedy, 10 Eyewitness News.
Okay, so again, we built this technology based on 3D printing. You heard we went to a lot of design variations. We actually developed new printers to manufacture what you see here now. And again, based on translating something into the real world, you really need to have a commercial outlet. So this time I learned from my experience with the company in Singapore that we really needed right from the beginning the people who would be interested to champion this from a company point of view. So 2 of my PhD students and postdocs, they were not interested in an academic career. They told me that right from the beginning when they started. And therefore, they were very key then to form this other spin-off company, which is in Germany, because this innovation was also a combination of my appointment as a research professor in Munich at the Technical University of Munich. So the IP, we have 3 patents between QUT and the TUM. And then this company, Bellaceno, licensed the technology into the company and developed this further. But again, the company was formed more than 3 years ago. But I come to that in a second. We did the first patient only now. much faster than in Singapore. But still, it took 3 years to build the company to now again translate what we had developed in the lab in respect to tech into a company, which is again very different because everything has to be related to this norms, this certification, and so on. And this was done at Bellaseno, right? And again, the major advantage of this implant is that it is biodegradable again. So the current technology is silicone implants, which have a lot of side effects. So more than 80% of the patients are treated with silicone implants. And then another 20% of patients are treated with the patient you saw in the clip, which is the transplantation of the patient's own tissue. But the issue is, and I've been a couple of times in the surgeries, these surgeries also can take up 6, 8, 10 hours, and they leave behind a very large tissue defect into the patient. So what we do is we combine our biodegradable implant still with the patient's own tissue, but we only need a very small amount of fat, which we take out of the patient, and then we inject it into the scaffold, as you can see here. And then this injected fat is remodeled into the patient's own tissue. So again, this is all based on the innovation of additive manufacturing. So additive manufacturing is really the commercial term, right? I guess you have heard often the term 3D printing, but 3D printing is something you do at home with a printer you buy from Aldi. You do this little toys and stuff and so on, which often does not have a lot of value and so on. There's a big.
Dietmar, can I ask you, sorry, a question there about the breast scaffolds? Given that the ability to grow your own breast and not have an implant, to me, just looks wildly better, you know, as a technology. What resistance are you, have you experienced resistance to this from doctors and patients, or like is everyone kind of just waiting for this to come out and everything will change quickly?
Yes, this is actually a big issue for us, and that's actually why I'm so much involved in the best centers in behavioral economics. So you would think that because the technology has so many advantages that everybody would go for it, like also the lady said in the clip. However, the relationship is who's the end user, right? Of course, you can argue the end user is a patient, but there's somebody in between, and that is the surgeon, right? And the surgeon has a very big influence on the decision of the patient in respect to the treatment. And what we have seen is that there was a lot of resistance among the surgeons with this new technology. And therefore, we did now a study where we had a questionnaire for more than 700 breast cancer patients, which got reconstructions, 40 surgeons, and then also the breast surgery nurses. And when you talk to a surgeon, the surgeon will tell you that the patient will make the decision for which treatment, for which surgery the patient is going for. When you talk to a patient, the patient says, no, the doctor convinced me, the doctor told me I have to do this, right? So we did a semi-quantitative study to really get this data out. So one of the things now is really which type of marketing strategy we have in the future to really roll this out to the market, where we still need to do a lot of research to find out again, that relationship between the patient and the surgeon, and what do we need to market to whom, which advantages do we have to explain to the surgeon, which might be not an advantage for the patient. So for example, obviously, also the companies which are having at the moment the major shares, and it's actually only 3, for the silicone implants, they have a big marketing machinery behind marketing the products towards their surgeons. So we again have to come up with very smart marketing strategies because these are also very large companies with very large marketing and sales budgets to break into this market. But again, before we can do this, we have to go to all the steps of the regulatory side. And again, this is something, again, I want to show you here how the timeline is. It's faster with osteopore because we have learned from the past. But still, again, you have the concept phase where you have the idea definition. You need to do the feasibility studies. You have to develop a roadmap, right? And you have to decide what is fundamental research, what is the basic research. Then you need to develop the tech. And again, in this case, again, this is developing new printers. This is developing software. And then this part is actually quite interesting. You know, a lot of the academics have a very hard problem with this, right? And I have to admit, I still sometimes have a problem because I have a lot of new ideas, right? Which I like to bring in, and I see a lot of advantages. So what you have seen me mentioning in the video again is that I said that we want to combine these biodegradable implants with antibiotics because infection is a big problem. But you are not starting now by bringing such a product into the market because it's way too complex. So you have two very new things. You have this biodegradable implant and you have the antibiotics. So to bring that together is very difficult for proving the outcomes and also convincing the regulatory side. So therefore you need to have what is called a design freeze in the company. So what we do at the same time, I develop the tech now in my lab. So I'm doing now a lot of studies where I do the combination of such a biodegradable scaffold with the antibiotics because I have the freedom to do this in my research lab, but the company can't, right? Because they have to bring out this product. The first product will be without the antibiotic, right? And then you have to do the first in human, but then you also have to do larger clinical trials. So I'll come back to what I said before, where we said, again, this is like 2 years ago, that we wanted to do clinical trials today. Yes, we have been doing this. So this is our first patient. You can read this up. And it's a very special case where we actually use the implants for what is called a channel fest and not for cancer, breast cancer reconstruction. So this is Caitlin. And here again, very important that you work with surgeons, which Dr. Michael Wagels was a plastic surgeon who has been collaborating with my team for the last 8 years. That they also pick up the innovation and they are willing to adopt their surgical techniques and so on, right? So here you see the implant we designed for correcting this, what is called the channel fest chest. And again, all the design work has been done in my lab. You know, we took the CT scan data and the MRI data from Caitlin. And then we developed for the surgeons this model so that we could do what is called a pre-operative planning. So that the surgeon, before doing the actual surgery, had a very good idea about the anatomy, about all the structures and so on, and the way he would implant the biodegradable implant, which you see here. Then we had multiple also iterations of the scaffold design, because you know the scaffold, you might think it is actually 360 milliliters in volume, right? It's quite large, but we only used the incision of 5 centimeters. So what the implant had to be able to do is that Michael could actually squeeze it up and push it through this pocket. And when it was through the pocket, that it would open up and would be able to maintain the space, but also maintain the pressure, for example, when Caitlin would be rolling in bed and so on, that the scaffold would not collapse, right? So again, these are very important parts in the design features, and when you have to do a lot of planning and need to have the tech to do the prototyping and so on. So again, this is now about 2.5 months ago, and Caitlin is doing really, really well, which we are very proud of. And here again, this is the implant, which is a very specific design in the inside. with different pore sizes and so on. This is a young surgeon and PhD student of mine, which I co-supervise with Dr. Vegas. This is Dr. Matthew Cheng, who does a part-time PhD with me, who is also involved in this project to move this innovation forward. So what we are planning now is a larger clinical trial for the implants, but as always, one of the issues is to find the funding. So this is something where we again have to apply for research grants. So we are just submitting a big grant now to the Australian National Health and Medical Research Council, because we want to do a study now with 60 patients over a period of 3 years with follow-ups. And obviously this is something which needs a significant investment. Yeah, so I think I will stop here, and you might have some questions which I hope I can answer. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dietmar. Okay, can you guys pop your questions into the chat, or you can unmute the microphone? But I want to kick off with Dietmar. How did you come up in the beginning with the idea of 3D printing of body parts? Like, you know, where did that idea even come from?
So, you know, I started as I studied biomedical engineering in Germany, and then I also went 1 year to the US to do my research thesis there and so on. So that year was very formative for me. This was done at the University of Utah, and I worked with a pioneer in the field, with Professor Willem Kolff, who unfortunately passed away 3 years ago. But his first invention was that he invented the artificial kidney. And when I worked in his program, he had a big artificial heart program. And as I said, you know, this year in Salt Lake City was so informative for me, because he had already this interdisciplinary team. So we had surgeons working in the team, biomechanical engineers, vet surgeons, we had nurses, material scientists, and so on. So this really had a big impact on what I wanted to do. But when I went back to Germany, I also, you know, I started then in industry first, because I wanted to get a job and so on. So I first started to work in a company. In those days, it was called Boehringer Mannheim. It used to be a very big pharmaceutical company, but they were bought by Roche. But the project I worked on was developing new glucose sensors. And that was then, for me, the first direction where I thought about printing, because we developed a text there to print these glucose sensors. And then after this, I went to a medical device company near the Black Forest. And that's again where I did see the big advantages of 3D printing. And that's how biodegradable implants, because the company group I was working for, they had a lot of metal implants, right, which do a great job, but they also fail after years, some after decades. So to have a biodegradable implant which really guides your own tissue formation and then the implant is gone, did make a lot of sense to me, and that's what I have been doing since I started my academic career 20 years ago.
And so what tips would you give students about, you know, the innovation process? What are the kind of your top 1 or 2 sort of pieces of advice about doing something in the space of innovation?
So as I said, you know, I think it's, for me, I really distinguish between the fundamental research. So there the innovation is really, you know, to work hypothesis driven and so on, to create really new fundamental knowledge, right? So this is one side. But the other side of innovation is really to make a product, which has nothing to do with hypothesis anymore, right? And one of the problems is, even with a lot of my senior academic colleagues, they always mix this up. right? And they make a lot of statements based on some fundamental work, how the final product can look like, but they never work on it. And they never see the issues, you know, how to get there. So what I teach my students is really these both processes, really the innovation in fundamental research and the innovation in the translation, which is very different. And that they also understand this conceptually. Yeah.
So if any of the marketing students either watching online or watching then later in the lecture recording were interested in doing any work with your lab, you know, what are the opportunities there with internships or with doing an honours or a master's, you know, to work with biomedical people?
Yeah, I think, you know, this is now the next frontier for us, right? Because again, even so, when you now technically translate, and to give you another example, you know, when we started this work in Singapore, you know, the great advantage of the tech is that we can do patient-specific implants. And we thought that, you know, in 5 or 6 or 7 years, no custom-made implants would be used anymore because everybody gets patient-specific because it has so many advantages, right? But this didn't happen. The percentage of patient-specific implants is still very small. And one of the reasons is because of that you have to find your market. Because as I said, you know, for actually quite a large number of patients, bulk produced implants work really well. So as engineers, where we would need the help from the marketing people is to find the markets where you would really need the patient-specific one and where you would have the consumer who would drive it, right? Because as I said, you know, coming back again in this relationship, and maybe you, Rebecca, and also the students, they have made the experience when you talk to doctors, right? It's a question how informed you are, because a lot of times the doctors, often with very good intentions, but often also maybe with other motivations, they want to push you towards a certain treatment, right? Which is obviously also related to that there are companies behind with their products which try to influence this consumers. So I think that's where we would need, you know, really to design very interesting projects with students from the marketing side to do the research in that area. Yeah.
Great. So if there's any of you out there who are looking at going on beyond your undergrad, so for instance, doing an honours year or going into the Master of Philosophy, and you're interested in doing something in innovation and marketing, just send me an email. There are GPA requirements, but very rewarding sort of opportunities to move into this space and working across 2 faculties. So please send me an email and, you know, we can see what opportunities there might be. Okay, I can't see any other questions in the chat. So look, I want to thank you very much, Dietmar, for sharing that knowledge. As always, I'm always super impressed with what you do and the scale of the impact that you and your team are having and are going to have is really quite breathtaking. So thank you very much for coming along and sharing your experiences with us here in the classroom.